Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the patience. And we do have now all the panelists here, and we're starting this session on net zero and decarbonization. I think it's a very, it's a very vast subject. I don't know if will be able to capture all the things within 45 minutes or not, but we will try our best as we have distinguished panelists over here from varied backgrounds and bringing in the best over here. So we will try and get a gist of what's happening across the thematic area of net zero and decarbonization. We have already heard in the first, in the first session about the net zero goals which India has taken, about the 2070 goal which we have, and then globally what we are going to actually going for the, if you talk about the COP 28, it's a year wherein as nations we have all come together and submitted our nationally determined contributions to the UNFCCC, and this is the year of global stocktake. It's been 5 years, and what we are going to do as nations over there in UAE, Dubai in November, is to discuss how we have progressed on our net zero and on our contributions and what we have done until now, and to take stock of it and then readjust our goals and readjust our commitments towards the nature and do more in terms of climate action. That's the theme of this year. And there have been several multilateral agreements that have happened in the meanwhile. If you take about land and biodiversity, we have had the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework which has happened. If you talk about sustainable shipping, the International Maritime Organization has actually come up with agreement on sustainable shipping and how we have to reduce emissions in shipping. If we talk about fisheries, if we talk about any aspect of, even the at Bonn there was recently there was a meeting of all countries to understand what needs to be the agenda for the COP28, and several such important agreements have taken place in the last 6 to 7 months, and India is also having the G20 presidency year this year, and during all of these conventions and all of these discussions and deliberations, the net zero and decarbonization is something that is very, very centerpiece, and it cannot be done by one stakeholder. Nothing can be done by one stakeholder. You need the policy aspects to be in place. You need the science, the R&D, and all the aspects to be in place. You need the implementation in which the private sector needs to get involved, and more so from a perspective of you and I. So even sustainable lifestyles is a theme which our lifestyle for environment, as our Honorable Prime Minister also speaks about it all the time. That's something that needs to be taken into consideration when we need to meet these net zero goals. Having said that, I would like to now move on to our distinguished panelists to hear from them their views on this subject, and in their own personal capacity as well as the institutional capacity, what are the key things or thematics is something that I would like us all to hear about, and then we will move on to the questions basically on what are the interventions and other aspects on levers, on financing, on means of implementation, because all of these are required when it comes to decarbonization and net zero. So I would like to invite Zarir to talk about his views on the subject, and then we will take on next. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashish. And thank you for framing this for us. Just to start off with, these are perhaps random discrete data points, but very pertinent in terms of setting out the contours of what we are dealing with. If you look at the global chemical industry, today 90% of carbon feedstocks into the industry come from fossil sources. Approximately 41% of plastics go back into landfills or are burnt. 57% of fertilizers being used actually get absorbed by plants, the rest goes into runoffs. 17% of chemical industries globally, just 17% have today put in place science-based targets for themselves. Right? There's an estimate that says if we continue in this sector, business as usual, with our current linearity, we would be contributing a 4-degree increase in temperature by 2050 versus the 1.5 that somebody mentioned in an earlier session might even get hit as soon as 2027, right? The industry globally emits close to 925 million tons of CO2 every annum. That's about 2-3% of emissions. If you zero in on India, there's a CII study that says this could be as high as 10%. Right? Over the last decade, both Indian GDP and Indian CO2 consumption per ton has grown by 5 to 6% per annum. And the reason I say this is not to sound pessimistic, but to just emphasize that this is not trivial. Yeah? The magnitude of the challenge is quite significant. There's a unique challenge that we face here. You want to become, you have ambitions of becoming the world's largest economy, and at the same time balance our sustainability challenges towards becoming net zero by 2070. Right? How do we do this? I think presents a huge opportunity. Because in the chemical industry, while we may be part of the problem, I think we can all agree around this room that we are a significant and pivotal part of the solution. Right? I can't think of any sustainability solution that doesn't depend upon chemistry. Whether it's building a solar panel or a solar module, whether it's building blades for wind turbines, whether it's what goes into energy storage solutions, either for mobility or stationary storage, whether it's the whole issue around hydrogen, fusion, nuclear, whatever you look at, whatever you touch will depend upon chemistry for a solution. And I think that presents the opportunity. And obviously this requires interventions, whether it's carbon capture utilization, storage, the whole change towards renewables and changing our energy basket, moving towards sustainable bio-based feedstocks or other feedstocks. I'm glad you touched upon lifestyle for environment, because that's something that we don't talk about much, but everybody in this room as individuals has a part to play in the choices we make, in the way that we consume, in the way that we dispose. I think we sometimes tend to underestimate what we all need to do as individuals also, not just as organizations or units, but what we need to do as people. And I think all of this will come together to play, this role. And I'll come back to more specifics as we move on.
No, this is I think, very beautifully captured the stats, and also the fact that if you talk about, the entire aspect of financing, you talked about, close to 2% is the contribution for emissions, and this is something that, globally, if you just talk about the NDC needs of financing, it's again around 4 to 6 trillion, which is required, and all of that, even as business as usual, as companies, as institutions, we forge ahead. there will be requirements even by the largest of the companies, and or there will be requirements by everyone to reach those net zero goals. And very rightly and aptly put, that interventions will have to be prioritized and again looked at in a very the thought process needs to change when it comes to how the chemical industry can play a role in all of these technologies. And that brings me to Vikram. Vikram is doing some very fantastic new and innovative aspects, and we keep bumping into each other in several panels. So I would like to hear from you, Vikram. What are the key things and your views on the role of innovation? And we did have Professor Pandit in the previous session to also talk on why should we be scared of doing something new. We always think about tried and tested methodologies to probably do things. And when it comes to net zero, decarbonization, and when the time, as Zarir mentioned, is so small that we are reaching that 1.5 degrees centigrade, what do you think? And a few views.
Thank you, Ashish. So I appreciate Professor Pandit's words, because I think it is very encouraging to hear from him to say that don't be scared to fail, and keep innovating. And I think that's a really good lesson to learn from a country like India, and especially people in the chemical industry, that we should keep innovating. I see a lot of innovation happening in India, and if I look down a few decades, I think we will be leading in innovation when it comes to chemistry as well. So as a young company, we're only about 10 years old. My focus has been from the beginning how to use waste to create value. And it's not necessarily like recycling kind of waste, but byproducts from other industries, and how can we make them into something that is more valuable for other industries. So we first started off with what is coming out of a steel plant, because steel plants have a lot of waste that they generate, and that's actually issues for them. We started off by that. We started making products for the aluminum industry. Today we make carbon black as well. We developed a technology. I was visiting Japan a lot, and I was just seeing what they were doing, and they were so ahead technologically and had been innovating for the last 20, 30 years, but they just could not scale, and they didn't have the growth ambitions that maybe we as a nation do. So we kind of secured some technology from there, and we started developing a technology to convert this waste out of a steel plant into synthetic graphite that goes into lithium-ion batteries. So when we actually draw out on a paper what we do, it's unbelievable that it's 100% Indian value addition, what today PLI schemes are asking for. So we're taking complete waste out of India and making it into something that has a global shortage, and the roadmap ahead is also looking very promising. One other thing we do in our company is, even as a private company, in the last 3 years, we've released sustainability reports. And I think internally that helped us set a benchmark. Look, this is where we are today. This is where we are against our peers. And we started making a roadmap, small steps to see how we can do it. And we always, when we enter a product, we do a life cycle analysis study. A good life cycle analysis study tells us what we're doing wrong before we build the plant. Right? I look at facilities in Europe, in Belgium, in Germany, and they're 20, 30, 40 years old. And we are lucky that we're getting to build greenfield facilities, and we can actually take a slightly high-level view and say, how do we make this very ESG compliant? How do we build in certain things to make it really global and really focus on sustainability? So some of the products that we make are much lower carbon footprint than any other company globally. It's just because you have to focus on that at the master plan stage and not say, when we make money, when we sell, then we will spend that capex. So we have to kind of build that in, and that has to become kind of the DNA of the company and the way we look at it.
Excellent, Vikram. I think industrial symbiosis is something that is catching up quite a lot, and we do have eco-industrial parks which are coming up across nations, and South Korea has been in the forefront of it, but also from Japan. You've brought in technology, and I think MIDC and others need to take a stock of all these aspects and, you know, bring in that. Uh, I mean, we all talk about individual units going green, right? So if you just think about an entire industrial park being supplied by green energy, and I think you could see a shift in you know, achieving this net zero very quickly. Because if we are in a eco-industrial zone, that would mean that your products which are going to come up are quite green, and that is something that needs to be thought through uh, very quickly by the policymakers as well as the government, state as well as central. Uh, the thought that you brought about the aspect of circularity is very much a part of what we have to going forward as a normal business case, because it cannot be something unique henceforth. Because if we don't do that, then we will all lose out on our potential, and it is something that also achieves profitability.
Yeah.
I think that's the
So,
thing.
you know, you mentioned circularity, and what we look at in our business specifically is that any business that we enter, how in 5 years can we make it circular?
Yeah.
So, for example, we are spending a lot of money and we're scaling up our technology to make graphite for lithium-ion batteries. Today, we have also started a lithium-ion battery recycling facility. And we incubate that business, and we see, look, in 3 to 5 years, this will become completely circular, and that is what customers are looking for. We make virgin carbon black out of, you know, again, petrochemicals and crude. And again, we start getting into tire recycling. And that is what customers are looking for. They're looking for innovation, and I think in India, companies are innovating.
Sure.
But you have to take that little holistic view and make a good roadmap.
Excellent. And he also brought, Vikram also brought out the aspect of life cycle way of looking at things. And when we talk about the chemical industry, and there are quite a few levers, like many of you in the room would, including, and we will talk more, Zarir can give more information on the levers. And one of the key levers is also to reduce the way we get steam. So basically it cannot be fossil fuel, but it may be using biomass or any other sources. And when it comes to biomass, and we just stop at that, but how is biomass getting created? It's coming from agriculture. And from agriculture, how does agriculture, the way of looking at agriculture needs to be also be green. And that comes to the part where we have a speaker, Parvati, who will let us know about how we need to do, how we can green agriculture, how we can have climate smart agriculture. Over to you, Parvati, and yeah, we would like to hear more about it from you.
Yeah, that talks about intervention. So, thank you, Ashaji. Just to add on to the point, I come from a industry, academia ecosystem where a lot of intervention, a lot of innovation starts with interpretation and introspection. So for that, when you talk about biomass, when you talk about the feedstock, finally it comes down to the agriculture. When it comes down to the agriculture, whatever intervention that you're trying to build, whether the farmers are aware, because we have a lot of discussions with the farmers, and there are a lot of miscommunication that happens with not having a cover crop, leaving it at like that, doing a lot of Panchagavya, Jivamruta without understanding the actual science behind it or the fermentation part of it. So we have formed a particular ecosystem. We call them as Cascade, which stands for, the name has changed now from Center for Achieving Sustainable Climate Action, Development and Engagement, because these three are very important. And this is a part of Godavari biorefineries, where we have a distillation unit with 600 kiloliter per day capacity. And we take canes from 18,000 farmers, which are loyal farmers which have been giving us cane for last 25 to 30 years. Now the main intervention is, they have come to us with a problem statement that the yield is coming down. We know that. But still they're coming with the concept that it's because of salt stress. They've already come up with the final, this is the reason. And they're also coming up with questions like, this Panchagavya is better or chemical fertilizers are better. So there needs to be an intervention. There needs to be a co-designing team. So that's where we come up with. So with Cascade, what we are trying to do is actually understand if we have to do a carbon sequestration through soil, which particular combination will work best. We have research articles saying that the first 3 millimeter of your soil can absorb almost, 2.5 gigatons of carbon. These are all calculation, valuation. But there are very limited research which actually tells you the best combination or what combination works best and whether there is a periodical search, first year, second year, third year, to show you the soil data, which shows that there is carbon sequestration. So these kind of intervention where there is an industry, where there is an academia, where there is a research organization, NGO and multiple public-private companies coming together. So with this, we have industry here, we have Michigan State University here, we have Egerton University from Kenya, we have Sumaya University, and what I'll say is multiple stakeholders, multiple faculties, and multiple farmers involved. So there is a good combination of 18,000 farmers, and we have to cater to 280,000 plots. So we have multiple programs which are tandemly arranged, which are interlinked to actually build solutions. So we are pragmatic. We know that regenerative agriculture system is not the solution, but it is a long-term commitment. It is a sustainable choice. It's a co-designing where you're committed to a particular community to actually sequester carbon through regenerative farm practices so that you sequester carbon for a longer time. And there is a lot of circularity there because we are also trying to limit the kind of inputs that we are putting so that whatever farmers have, those livestock inputs are then coming back to the soil. That's it.
Thanks, Parvati. And I think the industry, academia has always been interacting, but it's also time now to go further and having, organizations and NGOs to bring in, because we used to do it all from a perspective of CSR or something, something for a social cause. I think bringing them into the value chain, bringing them and looking at it as a way of reaching net zero and decarbonization, it's very important to bring all actors and all stakeholders into the system so that at the end of the day, the entity or the organization which you are all in, that becomes green as well as profitable. I think that's the messaging which I would like to highlight over here. And we have Mukund over here, who again, very distinguished. Let us know your views about all that you've heard. And you're the last person on the panel, but definitely I think we're looking forward to look more on additives of what we have been having spoken here. Thank you, Mukund.
Thanks, Ashish. And it's a tough act to follow after these distinguished panelists, especially because technically I'm not from the industry. I run a company called Moglix, which is a B2B commerce company, helps digitize procurement. And you're probably wondering, what am I doing in this conference, right? But my first claim to fame is I was running a chemicals company before this in India. But now in Moglix, I thought I can bring a different flavor to this. And let me start with there's a study which says that sustainability, there's three elements of sustainability and reducing greenhouse gases. One is what they call scope 1, which is within your boundaries. What can you control, right? This is how can you produce more sustainable material, or how can you use more sustainable material in what you are, how you're producing things. Scope 2 is some of the key things in chemicals, which is electricity, steam generation, water, right? All these are procured items, but they're large bulk items, right? Which also contributes to sustainability. The third one is scope 3, which is the supplier and partner ecosystem. Kind of like farmers also, that's partner ecosystem. Any guesses on how much the studies have shown so far, scope 1 and scope 2, how much can you bring down, what percentage reduction is possible through scope 1 and scope 2 versus scope 3? Any guesses? What percentage of greenhouse gas emissions are possible? I'll give you the answer. It's 40 to 50%. The remaining 50% is scope 3, which is your partner ecosystem. And since we are supply chain procurement optimizers, what I wanted to talk about is the role of that partner ecosystem in this. Parvati spoke about farmers, but there's so many other things out there, right? Packaging going towards sustainability. Even water reduction, part of sustainability. Are you buying the right kind of chemicals which are sustainably produced and are reducing your water consumption, right? That could be another one. Even as simple as, are you aggregating both your outbound and inbound supplies so that the truck or vehicle movement is reduced? All these start contributing bit by bit towards your, think of it as every drop counts. And unless you attack multiple levers on the scope 3, you actually won't get to your sustainability goals. There's one other thing I just wanted to mention really quickly, which is I think we're in a perfect storm in India. Everybody's talking about China +1, right? So probably more and more, I'm seeing more and more inquiries coming to India from as an alternative or as a de-risking to China, right? Especially in chemicals, but in other areas also. The second is local demand itself is growing. As consumerization grows, right? As industrialization grows, as urbanization grows, chemical demand is going to increase locally, right? So that's the second. On the flip side, someone in the previous panel spoke about Lehman and reduction in demand. There is actually a reduction in demand happening, right, globally. And that is causing both price reduction of our finished products, but also just dumping from other countries into India, which is also causing a problem. So I'd say, on top of all this, you have now layer sustainability. So is there really an ROIC on this? Can you get a payback on this? And the reason I mentioned this is, again, you can't just focus on scope 1 and scope 2. If you include scope 3, you'll realize there is an ROIC on this overall ecosystem, and how do you bring down sustainability? One last data point I'll give, again, a study by one of your other consultants, okay? So they say only 5 of the top 20 Indian chemical companies have gone out and declared what their 2030 goal of greenhouse gas emission reduction is going to be. So unless you set a goal out there, it's not going to happen. Then we can find multiple levers to kind of attack, including scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So I'll just end there and then leave it to the panel.
So Mukund, very, very well put, and nobody was thinking that why are you here on the panel, but definitely that's a 50% problem solved by him being on the panel. So supply chains, obviously the optimization and other aspects, I think it's very, very important. And when I talked about life cycle, obviously it reaches to that level in which each actor has to play, and there is an amount of efficiencies that can be brought in. The way Mukund put it is that sustainability putting on the top. Again, I'm bringing back the topic that it needs to be embedded. It cannot be on top. I think if companies and everyone thinks about profitability and sustainability as a part of that profitability, I think there's no way it can ever be missed. And it just becomes way of life. And again, bringing to the topic of lifestyle for environment, if we just generally each of us start thinking in that line, even our businesses will speak the same language. Coming to the point that, I made another mistake of saying that Mukund was the last man on the panel. We do have Sunita waiting for us online, and I think, sorry Sunita for that. And over to you to hear from you about your views and your interactions with the government and the policymakers, and what how you are leading the way in terms of the thought process and your views about the same. So over to you, Sunita.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. All right, good. No, I don't think you need to say sorry. I have to say sorry that I can't be there with you all. Would have really liked to be there, and very interesting conversations, but I had a clashing appointment here. So I think, first of all, was very interested to hear what everybody is saying, and I'll start with what Zarir was saying. I think it's a hitting reality of where we are today. But at the same time, if you kind of look at what, and I'll focus on India and to the comments that you made, the journey that we've made from COP21 to COP26 and onwards, I think India has done a fabulous job as of now, yeah. From the narrative of being a developing economy and really can't commit to, decarbonization targets, we've now gone ahead and made these commitments, and that has triggered such a huge change in the country. Yeah, one of the largest solar missions in the world, the National Green Hydrogen Mission, the Green Ammonia Mission. Lately, you have this green credit program, the carbon trading system being sort of set up. Yesterday, I read about the Global Biofuels Alliance in the G20 meeting, upcoming G20 meeting in Goa. So I was also very fortunate to share the stage with Dr. Vijay Saraswat some time back, and you can see the amount of effort that the government is looking at to ensure that India is well on the way to meeting the targets. But also, I think it's a little too late, too little. Yeah. So, I mean, there's really so much to achieve, there is really a very strong intent, but to make it happen, I think each one in the value chain, each player, including individuals, need to make a huge contribution. Yeah. So. I think I'll just stop there, talk on the basic what's happening in the ecosystem currently, and then go on to talk about BSF later. Thank you. Thanks, Ashish.
Thanks, Sunita. I think yeah, that's the overall sense we're getting on how each player is also geared up now, and it's time for action. Now, when it comes to time to action, I think there are three levers. I think we need to all um, also as a country and also as institutions. I think bringing out the best practices, like knowledge sharing, I think it's one of the key things which needs to be brought in. Then there is, and I call it means of implementation as a language which is multilaterally agreed. I think when we talk about, the knowledge sharing part, or countries to countries, institutions to institutions, all the industry bodies need to enhance the way we are actually sharing knowledge on the best practices. That is one. Second is also on the capacity building. So what we are doing as institutions to build the capacity of all the people needed to get this action on the ground, and the threat is real, and what we are going to do about it. And then there is a financing aspect of it. The government needs to come in and step in for the initial days, but at the same time, what are we as institutions doing? How do we pool in resources? Like, if the supply chain needs to be efficient, then how can industries come together, industry bodies can come together to make it much more efficient, and that will again seep into your profitability and making green and sustainable the entire sector. So I would now start with Zarir, but quickly 2 minutes on what are the initiatives so that we can share amongst ourselves at least on how to take about this entire gamut of taking action to its required targets of 1.5 degrees centigrade. What are we doing as of today? So over to you, Zarir.
So if you look at us in Tata Chemicals, I think our sustainability objectives are very much in line with the Tata Group sustainability initiatives. where we've taken at a group level a target of being net zero by 2045. And you need to remember that within the group, there are 3 hard-to-abate sectors that form a very major part of the group: steel, power, and chemicals. And despite that, there's this very publicly committed target of going net zero by 2045. Within Tata Chemicals, obviously we have that same target, but we've also set ourselves interim milestones on the journey. And we were the first of the 5 companies in India to take a SBTi target of a 30% reduction by 2030. Right? So that, I think, is extremely important. You need to put a stake on the ground, because once you do that, you'll start working towards it. And the 3 pillars that I spoke about, one is decarbonization, the second is circularity, and the third is preservation of natural resources and biodiversity. Within the decarb pillar, as I said, we now have a target. We commissioned last year the UK's first, and as far as I know, only till date, industrial scale CCU unit. We capture 40,000 tons of CO2 from our utilities, and we use that as feedstock for making a very high value pharma and hemodialysis grade chemical intermediate, sodium bicarbonate actually, for supply into the pharma sector. And it came up just in time because paradoxically, it's so strange. We talk about a problem with CO2. The UK actually, the last 2 years, has been facing a critical shortage of CO2 for industrial use, right? And it's a key feedstock for us, and I'm glad this came up on time, but more importantly, it's brought our carbon footprint down. The second thing that we've done is taken also a commitment to double the content of renewables in our energy basket by 2025. And that's a mix of moving towards low emission fuels, moving towards biomass, whether it's sourced from nearby localities, whether it's growing our own biomass, starting to move very heavily into doing some innovation around algae and microalgae for biomass. We certainly believe hydrogen is going to play a big role in our industry. We also believe that small modular reactors can provide a solution. It may be a way off, but that's another thing that we should be keeping our eyes open for. And of course, what we are doing around energy efficiency, there's a study that says that you can actually reduce your scope 1 emissions by 10% by just energy efficiency measures. The second pillar, of course, is circularity. And there, once again, very ambitious targets. For us, water is critical. And we said we will go water neutral, 0 freshwater withdrawal by 2030. Our largest site in India has been 0 freshwater neutral for the last 12 years now. We don't draw a single drop of groundwater or lake water, right? It's all seawater recycled. We plan to take that to our other sites as well. People talked, I think, in the morning about CO2 being the new oil. I think water is also going to be the new oil. It's very, very clear, to us at least. The second is, of course, looking at circularity in terms of utilization of raw materials. At our site in Gujarat, for many years now, we've taken all of our waste streams and converted that into cement. We today have 100% fly ash utilization from our utilities, in our in-house cogen plant. We've started making inroads into producing specialty silicas from rice husk ash, once again, as perhaps a competitor to carbon black, but we look upon it as a complementary ingredient to carbon black for green tires and the new labeling rules that are coming into the tire industry, for example. So that's around circularity. And the third is around biodiversity and preservation of natural resource. And there we've done an impact assessment of what our current sites do for biodiversity in terms of their impact. We've taken targets around that. I think we focus a lot around climate mitigation. The one area where I think not much focus is going both in terms of stuff being done on the ground and also in terms of financing is on climate adaptation. And I think on that front, this whole area around biodiversity is important. We focused on marine ecosystem because most of our products today actually have seawater and the coastline as genesis for what we do. In terms of climate adaptation, we've taken up in a large way restoration of mangroves. So we have about 200,000, 2 lakh mangroves planted in and around our operating sites. Coral transplantation, so the regrowing of corals that have been destroyed in certain areas across the Indian coastline. Just yesterday, we did a very focused program on plantation. We planted 1 lakh saplings in one day across our 4 operating sites. So I think that's another large area that we should all be looking at.
No, definitely. I think not many people, in the room probably would know, everyone knows about nationally determined contributions and our targets of 43% by 2030. But by 2030, we have also, as India, we have ratified the Kunming-Montreal Protocol, Global Biodiversity Framework, which also we have to ensure that, collective action moves towards restoring 30% of degraded land and also 30% of marine ecosystems. And that is something that I'm very happy to know from Zarir that all of these are aspects. And, the new words coming also are from nature-based solutions as well as ecosystem-based approaches. I think these are the things which we need to also integrate into apart from the SPTs, these are also things which we need to inculcate or improvise going forward in the longer run, because it has to be comprehensively dealt with, the climate challenges which we are facing. Over to you, Vikram, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's great to hear what the Tata Group is doing, and I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned. A group so big with such diversified businesses to have such a clear focus, such a clear roadmap. I think there must be huge challenges to implement it in a company that size. So smaller companies, whether it's 50 crores or 500 crores, if they focus, it will be much easier to implement. One of the things that I look at is, what are my customers doing? And a lot of my customers are more mature than us. So if I look at aluminium, for example, there's a huge focus on green aluminium. And sustainable aluminium, and you see that happening in the Nordics and certain parts of Europe, happening in India slowly as well. So what is their roadmap to get there? And how can we as a supplier, get there as well to support them in that journey? Same thing with tires. You hear so much focus from companies like Apollo and MRF today about how they're looking to go greener, how they're committing certain targets to customers, auto companies as well. And we have not declared our goals yet. We are, after 2 years, after 3 reports, this is the year we plan to declare a report. I wanted to take more time to kind of come up with a realistic target and also make sure we achieve it after that and not just have a target for having a target. So I think that is the approach we have taken. There's a lot to learn from other mature industries. Another thing we look at, and Moglix is a perfect example, is that, as a company, as a chemical manufacturer, you cannot do everything. You can do everything, but most probably you can't do everything right. So you have other companies that can do certain stuff better than you. So it's better to partner with them. Inherently there's been this approach that we will do everything, keep it in-house. As scale goes up, definitely bring it in-house to reduce costs. But I think there is an advantage to work with partners, whether they are partners who take your product and make a downstream product. They're doing value addition because you can't do it for some reason, because of scale or technology. I think there are partners in logistics. There are partners in supply chain as well. And if you find the right partners, then that really helps you go down that path and achieve your goals as well. I'll give you just one last example. You know, in the last 2 years, there's a lot of talk about EV transition happening in India, and we are in that space, but very, very upstream. It's a little difficult for some people to, especially bankers or even other industry people, to understand what we really do, and is it a sustainability-linked project? Can it get sustainability-linked funding? Because solar panels, wind, ETPs are much easier to explain and get funding for. So I did this small project in the company where I said, why doesn't everybody come to work in an electric scooter? And everybody likes a Bajaj or a Hero, and we kind of subsidized it for them to transition to a scooter. They could go pick it, and we would pay them 25,000 rupees to kind of subsidize the cost, and running cost is free. Not many people signed up initially, but I think we sold 10 or 15 scooters got taken in the company. Another initiative we did was that within the company, I always saw people pushing a trolley or a small cart going around for maintenance going around. So we got 2 Mahindra 3-wheelers that now electric that go around the plant and drop off tooling or spares to different parts of the plant. And again, I looked at that, why can't we use electric tankers to move our raw material? Because that is at the end our biggest impact. We all talk about, oh, we want like to have an EV at home and how it's, what's out there. Tata has great cars, other manufacturers are coming into India. And I went out and looking for a truck, and I just couldn't find one. It was so difficult to find a heavy-duty vehicle. It was only Murugappa Group and BYD that offered it. And we ended up getting one for Murugappa, and just last month we had it in the company. We brought it, got a nice 20-ton tanker behind it, and it moves raw material first, back or forth, and charges within our facility using waste gas from the carbon black plant that converts into power. So I'm saying there's a lot that can be done. It doesn't necessarily require large funding. It can be done at a much smaller scale, but that initiative has to be there, whether it's from the top or from the bottom. But I think there's a lot we can do.
Great, Vikram. I think every thought, if that thought goes into understanding the efficiencies, understanding sustainability, and if that every action which we take leads to a certain action, I think financing and other aspects, we keep talking about these aspects, those also can be reduced if we really do take that into consideration. Parvati, your views?
This is where I'm thinking why I'm here. Because I'm not from a company perspective. This is something I kept on telling Mr. Ashish, and I kept on telling my director, why am I here? Because it's a different crowd and it's not academia. But just to add on to that fact, Godavari Biorefinery is one of the mantra is giving back to the society. So just to give you a perspective of how we are giving back to the society is because we have different campuses with different communities set up and with different sustainable vertical. So at Samirwadi, one of the interventions that we want to do or what we want to try is again giving back to the society by setting up a lab where they can do multiple soil sample analysis, because what we have in ICR or the rest of the lab testing is maximum 25 samples a day. We have high throughput facility where we can do 1,000 samples a day. So that first, second, third year we can have mathematical model developed so that we can give a kind of approximation to the farmers that this would be your farm yield. Second intervention would be with respect to the capacity building, so that we have this digital app called Kisan Khazana, which would be then upgraded with the geofencing app, so that every farmers have a farm kundali with them, with respect to their landscape, with respect to their soil maps, with respect to what kind of crops they have done. So capacity building and creating awareness. There is another campus in Bhopal, which we have around 1,000. It's a private forest with different flora and fauna. So a lot of work with respect to agroforestry and the carbon sequestration, and also reviving the traditional art and the traditional knowledge of tribal community, documenting it and understanding how we can impact climate. The third community that we influence is the Warli community at Dhanu. That's also a campus that we have where we are closely linked with 300,000 female farmers. We are educating them with respect to what kind of crops they have to grow, how can you save water, because there are a lot of water shortage there, a lot of water stewardship project that can come up. We're also looking at initiatives where we can start mushroom farming there so that there is a revenue and also nutritional impact. Then there is another community at Kutch where we're closely related with the local artisan and also teaching them about the natural fibers and the traditional knowledge. So there are multiple linkage, each one or the other way, depending on the climate action, the sustainability vertical, and each has a particular outcome. So I'm not speaking from a company point of view because GBL is doing a lot of activities, but I'm not the right person.
So Parvati, again coming back to that chat we had, but this is something that, this is what a diverse panel brings to the table, right? So had Parvati not been there, then we would not have heard of this aspect at all. And we would be talking about all the interventions, but missing the point that circularity is just not about material, but also giving back to the society. I think that is very important. And if both the circularities will only give more profit where we are, where we stand from, where at least what I believe in. And that's the aspect which we would not have got if you were not on the panel. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
And over to you, Mukund. So,
Yeah, just to add to a bunch of things. First of all, Vikram raised this great, I think it's a fantastic example about employees using EV scooters, right? I think it's fantastic. So my son works at Tesla and they do something very similar. So my son is still in college, so he's doing an internship. They give $100 a month if you cycle to work every day, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, he's super excited about this because it's $100 additional and he's cycling to work every single day. Otherwise, he's very lazy, but he cycles to work for that $100. So to me, I think it's a mindset. It's really about, it's like those of you who have worked in manufacturing, it's about lean thinking. Everyone has to be a lean champion and lots of ideas bubble up. That's when it actually kind of becomes a much larger, initiative. So a few examples from Moglix and what we are doing, because we get exposure to a lot of manufacturing companies, so we get exposure. So what we are hearing and what we are doing ourselves. First, three things on the process side, right? The first one is we're all about digital procurement, which just makes it paperless, right? So you click and buy like you buy on Amazon, like minimal paper, right? So that's kind of Moglix enables you to just click, buy any item you want. The second is we focus on mostly MRO or consumables, which are used in your factory, which are not your raw materials. That's what we focus on. Now, interestingly, that is typically 80% of your POs, purchase orders, 80% of the number of vendors, but probably just 10% of your spend. The amount of time required to do that is kind of enormous, and what we do is simplify that. We digitize that, but you're also dealing with a very large number of vendors, and going back to my point around sustainability means your ecosystem and suppliers also have to get sustainable. We have started rating all the suppliers who are supplying to Moglix on ESG. We've started doing that. So it's typically an ignored area for most manufacturing companies. You're saying, is my safety harness manufacturer sustainable or not, right? We have started doing that, rating them, right? That's another one on the process. The last one I spoke about, which is consolidation and aggregation, which means less shipment, less freight. If you get into products, a couple of things we're seeing a big drive towards sustainable packaging, whether it is returnable pallets to whether it is the kind of wood being used, if it is pallets, corrugated boxes, what GSM do you use? Do you really need this strength? Can you use less GSM to achieve the same properties? So on. Can you move from plastic to other sources? Sustainable packaging is a big movement. CapEx, using green material for CapEx is also becoming more and more kind of a thing which companies are looking at. And then, of course, a bunch of sustainable, renewable energy products, right? Whether it is batteries, whether it is solar, rooftop solar. I mean, these are all basic things which most of you are already doing, but we're seeing more and more that coming from mid-sized companies all the way up to large companies. So.
Excellent, Mukund. And this Tesla example which you gave, It's simply brilliant, right? So what all we could do is achieve, all our employees to do is simply unimaginable. And one of the key things which recently India has come out of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and Sunita mentioned about it, and thanks Sunita, the Green Credit Program. I think it has got the potential to bring in all stakeholders into doing good for the environment and have climate action. I think everyone over here should have a lookout on this program. And I think we all do several things within our institutions, but to get a credit for it is also important. That that satisfaction that you're doing good for the environment. I think that I was fortunate enough to be involved in the conceptualization of this green credit program for the country. But having said that, this has evolved. It's an evolution. It took 2-3 years of rigorous aspect to come out, and it will become a law in 2 to 3 months' time. But that is something that I would ask and urge everyone to look out for. Sunita, over to you to hear from you on BASF as well as your personal journey, and that would also give every one of us some viewpoints, and then we will uh, conclude. Over to you, Sunita.
Thank you. So can you hear me right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think first, before I start about BSF, I think one of the things I really feel, and everybody knows this, in this whole, this world or this race towards decarbonization, and to the point that Parvati was talking that I don't know where I stand, why am I here on this panel? I think you really cannot, you know, uh, or start on your journey or go ahead on your journey without partnerships. Today, it's really not possible. Everything that we would achieve is together, working together with your partners across the value chain. So this is what I really feel, I believe in, and I'll tell you a little bit more when I'm talking about BASF. So at BASF, we clearly have a target of being net zero by 2050. And by 2030, we would like to reduce our absolute carbon emissions by 25% basis the 2018 year. And there are different ways that we are doing, and this has really triggered off a huge initiative, huge investments going into achieving our targets. So we do this under 3 pillars. So one is carbon management, the second is circularity, and third is what we call the sustainable solution steering method. So under carbon management, we have various projects ongoing. One of them that I can mention, like you have steam crackers, which is the starting point of really breaking the raw material into various basic products. Yeah, so, and this is really one of the most energy consuming processes. So this is one project, and I talked about partnerships. What we're trying to do and what we've initiated upon is, together with SABIC, Linda, and BASF, we would like to electrify one of our steam crackers. It's a huge project, and with renewable energy, of course. Yeah? So coming down to India, I think one of the first, the low-hanging fruit is about energy transition. So 80% of our Dahej site and Bangalore site today run on renewable energy. It's make and buy. It's a combination of make and buy. Secondly, with our, the R&D that we do, on one hand, we're kind of looking at really, and this will link to the sustainable solution steering method, we put in a lot of effort into finding new technologies which have a high sustainability product profile. Yeah, but while we're also internally looking at what we can do with our R&D monies, which is quite a huge sum, which is around 2 billion euros per year, we're also looking at what can we learn from the ecosystem around us. So our BASF venture capital arm today has an investment. One of the examples that I can give you, we have invested into a company in India which is called C6 Energy, which is looking at red seaweed as an alternative to fuel, fossil fuel, or also as renewable raw materials. Now, this is really interesting because, in a way, this red seaweed is grown on seawater, so you don't have this conflict of land, of fresh water, and also it's uniform in nature. You can really use the whole seaweed. So it's a very interesting technology, and we're kind of constantly looking at various technologies, investing and learning from them, and trying to sort of enhance our experience here. Talking about, and I came to, I think Vikram spoke about this, where, you have to look at it really during building your master plan itself. So today, now, any investments that we would want to do across the world, any investments that we have to do and which go into the board for approvals have to have a carbon factor accounted for a feasibility of that investment. So either you plan for a low carbon investment, or you actually factor in carbon mitigation into your investment proposal. So this itself has changed the way we work. So today, when I'm also I am responsible for looking at how do we grow in India. So when I look at investment plans, it starts right from how do I look at green inputs at the starting point itself, So that has changed drastically in PSF. Then when it comes to circularity, we have these huge programs called chem cycling, where we're looking at waste plastic, aggregating waste plastic through partners, getting into making pyrolysis oil out of the waste plastic, cleaning it, and then we would use this in our operations. And here also India participates because we are constantly monitoring the environment on how do we sort of look at, do we have companies doing pyrolysis oil, also sending the oil, the products for testing and sampling. So it's really a global effort, a networked effort. Yeah. Then coming to the sustainable solution steering method, 98% of our product portfolio has already been analyzed, and they're sort of bucketed into 4 categories, all the products. So the one with the lowest sustainability performance is they call the challenge products. Once they get into that basket, within 5 years, they will be phased out. The next would be transitionals, where we really see, can you put in efforts to move them up? Or if you cannot, then they get into the challenge bucket, and then they will be phased off. Then there are performers which have a fairly good sustainability performance, and then there are accelerators who actually have the best sustainability performance. And 60% of our R&D monies go into creating accelerators. So this is just to give you a flavor. I mean, sustainability is really at the heart of what we do, and there's huge amount of effort, investments, really looking at to reach our decarbonization targets.
Thanks, Sunita. And yeah, I think very, very, very diverse levers which have been used, and definitely I think it's the right step for everyone to take towards more greening and also becoming more environmentally conscious, and that's the theme of this panel. And I cannot summarize the diverse topics which we have touched upon today, but I think the highlights would be that, starting from the intention, moving towards planning, and today action is most important. And I think from that perspective, whatever is required to do on that front, right from the individual aspect to the company aspects, we need to take that into consideration. Ecosystem development, including life cycle assessments and taking the last mile into account, is very important, and I think that is something that came out of the panel definitely. Another aspect which came about is also not one person can do it all. So taking into consideration the actors, the taking along all the players across the value chain is very much required, and including the government, including the private sector, the non-government organizations, and the people in general, and individually. I think we need to all think on sustainability and move towards it, and have a very, very green chemical sector very soon. I would end with that, but before that, I would like to thank the organizers and Praveen ji also to have brought in such distinguished panelists, and the diversity. Loved the conversations, and I enjoyed thoroughly. Thank you so much.